They need a new GM.
They do.
They
we
sure
were
do.
not even going to do this today, and then we woke up and thought we'd been pranked.
Well, I'm not sure about being pranked. It's more of, well, there's a great tweet that I saw. It was the first thing I saw about the news. You wake up and as much as I shouldn't do it, I open Twitter, You roll over.
That's a bad habit.
The worst possible habit you can possibly have. But it's old hat from when, I was working and my job was to cover literally every little bit of news that happened. And so I'd wake up every morning in a cold sweat thinking everything had happened when I was asleep. So I'd literally snap myself awake, roll over, look at my phone. The first thing, just like go on Twitter to see if I'd missed anything. Thankfully, don't have to do that anymore. But the first tweet I saw was a quote tweet of the news that Jarmo Kekäläinen has been fired by the Columbus Blue Jackets after 11 seasons and one playoff victory or playoff series victory.
He was GM for 11 seasons and a day and a half. He was hired February 13th of 2013.
What a great work anniversary! Just like it's like dumping someone on your anniversary.
I remember when I used to work in New Jersey, every day they would send company-wide emails. This person's anniversary. This person's anniversary. This person's
Every company does that. When I worked at Cushman and Wakefield, they did that. Like every real company
didn't do that, or maybe they did it and Hockey Ops just was never on the emails.
Yes. Well, every real company does that. Let me put it that way. The last company I worked for did not do that. Obviously,
they probably didn't even know.
They didn't even know. But so I look at it, and the first quote was a quote from The Simpsons, and it was a reporter, and the reporter's question is, "Why now? Why not 20 years ago?" Because and it's a great quote from The Simpsons, but it's true because you go, why now? Why not 6 months ago? Why not
6 months ago?
Well, because
wow.
he hired, because Jarmo Kekäläinen hires Mike Babcock, and the guy doesn't even make it to the first informal practice that the team holds.
When those rumors came out,
it should have been
at the beginning of June last year, which was 9 months ago, that should have been it.
Yeah.
That should have been the end.
However, that's not the way hockey works. We know that. So he hires him, but it fails spectacularly. Like the worst, I would say we've been over this.
Go back and listen to last week's episode titled "I'm Blue Jackets."
Was that last week?
February 5th. Man, that was Monday.
That was 10 days ago.
Yeah, Monday. Go back. Highly recommend.
Crazy.
We did a deep dive into the Blue Jackets, and we talked about where they kind of go from here and everything that's gone on, and Jarmo being at the helm for all of it, and whether or not firing just him
is going to
change anything.
Now,
and 10 days later,
he's gone. So I was like, I'm wondering like why now and all that, and because back when Mike Babcock, it was the most like I said, we've been over this. It was the most unsuccessful, biggest failure of a coaching hire I think in NHL history.
Absolutely, he didn't even get to training camp.
Given the context of the hiring. Given the reason why he was blacklisted in the first place, or like the reason why he was sent out into hockey obscurity in the first place, and then the reason behind the firing and the timing, all of that culminates in the most, in the worst, most cataclysmic failure of a coaching tenure in NHL history. And so I go, he should have been fired then. Like they should have fired Mike Babcock, and then also like it should have been one press release. They've relieved Mike Babcock and Jarmo Kekäläinen of their duties. However, they let this bleed into the season, and as we covered on that extensive deep dive, this season has been a disaster for the Blue Jackets. Not just from a standings perspective, but from a no one will ever want to play for us right now perspective. From like almost driving out all of their prospects perspective. From wasting the potential of their, like I said, their stable of prospects and all that. And yet then they wait until February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. They let him have his day. The day of love, I guess. Cool. And then they fire him? It makes no sense. Well, it makes some sense in the sense that they don't want him, obviously, and we've been talking about this, to run the trade deadline.
Yeah, so I never understand this, and you and I talk about this all the time. Mm-hmm. When you have a GM who's desperate for their job, it's not like a Kyle Dubas situation last year. If he wanted to stay, he was going to stay.
Kyle Dubas, it was more of like
he wasn't in desperation mode to keep his job.
No, he was more like, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh, so might as well swing for the fences. And then if it doesn't work out, cool, I got a cushy new Pittsburgh job.
But what I'm saying is, like, if you have a GM where, like, Jim Benning is a good example.
Oh, yeah, where every year he's trying to save his job.
Exactly. If you have a GM where basically they're trying to save their job, they're in self-preservation mode, and that is not what you want your GM to be in when they're executing trades. So I think Columbus got it right in the sense of you don't want, if you were intending to fire him in the offseason anyways, you don't want him running your deadline.
No, definitely not.
But if you're going to fire a GM 4 weeks out from the trade deadline, you need to have a coherent plan for who is going to replace him.
Well, they have a coherent plan.
Because last time I checked, John Davidson has never been a GM, and we should probably talk a little bit about what a president of hockey operations does versus a GM, because those are two very different jobs. And yes, you're the top of the hockey ops department, but you're not doing the day-to-day stuff. And so
we've definitely gone over this on the podcast before, is the difference between a GM and a president of hockey operations. Like, I know we have, but it's important to maybe go over it a little bit again, just because, like you said, John Davidson has had a 25-year career in hockey, more than that, and he has never ever been a GM. He has only been a president or a president of hockey operations. He's never been a GM.
He's been a P or a POHO.
Exactly. And so, and now this is his job to sort of lead or he's taking over as interim GM, I guess. And he's going to lead the Blue Jackets through the rest of the cataclysmic season that they're on right now. And potentially search for a new GM when he should be someone who goes as well. Yeah.
Like, I look at this and I go, like, as a president of hockey operations, and I worked for a team that had a POHO and a GM. When I was originally hired, it was just a president, and then we got a GM. But like, you meet with the GM every day. Like, your offices are basically right beside each other. You're constantly talking about the direction of the team. But the GM is the one that's communicating with other GMs, communicating with agents, whereas the POHO is communicating with the owner, who would be Dr. John McMullen in this case, I think. Or no, that might be the Devils' old owner. Anyway, it's a mix something in Columbus. So he's communicating with the owners. He's worried about the business side of it. So he's meeting with the actual president of the Blue Jackets business operations. If they need a new practice rink, he's doing that. If they need team partnerships, so like let's say they wanted to partner with Ohio State for something, he would be in those meetings. Whereas the GM is like calling up other guys for trades. And they actually have a few trade chips that I think would be quite interesting.
Well, the GM also will go door to door canvassing for a new arena, right?
That
happens. It goes, hello, my name is GM of the local NHL team, and I can count on you for your vote for Bill whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's normal for a team. Absolutely.
So I look at this and I go, Boone Jenner, for example, is a guy.
NHL All-Star Boone Jenner.
Is a guy where you can't tell me that contending teams wouldn't line up for a guy like Boone Jenner.
They'll pay way too much for it, but they will.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, Columbus could get a haul to add to their stable of already ridiculously talented prospects if they traded Boone Jenner. But should John Davidson, who is never been a GM before, who is going to lead the process to find a new GM, is that the guy that should also be making the trades? Or should you maybe have somebody else doing that, because that might be too much for one guy's plate?
The Blue Jackets, obviously should be having, I think the days of having a president and a GM be the same person are gone.
Sometimes some teams don't even have a president of hockey operations. They have a GM and then they have a president of the team.
Yeah. But I think that,
which is fine.
I think those days are kind of gone, because we've seen every time we've seen in recent memory guys who've tried to do both jobs and it's failed. It's failing right now in Pittsburgh with Kyle Dubas.
Do you remember the days when we were younger when
Pat Quinn was coach and GM?
And GM. That's insane to think about.
There's a reason why
Bill Belichick was or coach and GM until a month ago.
There's a reason why he was the last one. It's because
he's also the GOAT.
Yeah, he's the GOAT, but it also failed spectacularly towards the end. They do not work.
You have too much to do.
Too much to do, and also you have to be able to separate relationships as a coach and as a GM. Like, if you're trying to reach someone as a coach, and I guess Belichick was able to sort of
separate that.
I would say walk this line for years, but it's you can't be a player putting your trust in a coach, because players talk to coaches about personal stuff, man. They go and they'd be like, hey man, I've been feeling, I don't know, depressed lately, or this is
I'm
not
having
going
issues
well.
at home.
Exactly.
Or I here's a fun one. I drank and drove, and I need you to get
stuff
me out
like
of
that.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
that's happened.
of course, and you can't. But then, like, to say that to a guy who's your coach, but then also that guy has the power to trade you, to cut you, to waive you, to buy you out. Like, you can't do that. But if you look at Columbus, like, as much as we spent an entire podcast talking about how terrible the situation is there,
They're set up for
this is an extremely appetizing job.
Absolutely. It's got to be one of the most... You look at what they have. They got Adam Fantilli. That's a top-line center. You got David Jiricek. That's a top-pairing D.
You got Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger, Kirill Marchenko,
Yegor Chinahov.
Exactly.
Patrick Laine, Johnny Gaudreau.
Emil Bemstrom, Adam
Adam
Boquist.
There's so many really enticing pieces in Columbus, but what I think I'm most interested to see, because very clearly we're not going to get a GM hire anytime soon, which obviously I think is the wrong choice, but what I'm interested to see is how Pascal Vincent now handles his roster, because the other night...
Well, they have a lot, yeah. Okay.
Boone Jenner played 26 minutes in regulation. That is more than most defensemen play in a game, and we're talking about a ceiling third-line player on a contending team. Under no circumstances should a forward be playing 26 minutes in a game unless their name is Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, or Austin Matthews. And even then, I went back and checked. I believe last season, McDavid played 25 minutes, I think, like 8 times. He's the best player in the league.
Look,
You can't play that much time.
Austin Matthews is the best pure goal scorer in the league right now. And
Yes.
there's no way he should be playing 26 minutes.
22
Unless
max.
it's like, unless it's like...
You get 2 5-minute power
unless it's
plays.
like playoffs, double OT. Like, literally, that's it.
Time.
Regulation is crazy. But you look at the roster; they have a lot. Like this is why they didn't want. This is clearly why they didn't want Kekäläinen to run the trade deadline. A, because he's been bad for most of his time there. But B, because they have a lot. Like, if they play this right, and again, there's not a lot of faith with John Davidson because he's never had this job before. But if they play this right, they can also recoup. Like you said, they can set themselves up immensely in the future. I mean, you look at even some of their guys that teams would covet, teams would want to trade for, like Jack Roslovic, for example.
Absolutely.
He's 27 years old. He's a pending UFA.
Full well, teams would covet Eric Goodbranson.
Absolutely. But even I'm saying
100%.
like Jack Roslovic.
Absolutely.
You could get at least a second round pick for that. Like considering that Sean Monahan just got a first.
I love Jack Roslovic.
And a prospect.
Fantastic.
If you play that well, like if you retain salary on that, and they have the cap space, then that's Jack Roslovic for $2 million prorated. Like you can get a first for that if you want to.
So what I was
Boone
saying
Jenner, that's a first. If you want to give up on him now, Texier, but Sean Corrali, like then you even
Well, no,
go.
I don't think you can get anything for Sean Corrali because he's
You don't think
awful
so?
this
Okay.
year. But what I was saying is
Ivan
like,
Provorov, Eric Branson, Andrew Peak.
You're not getting shit for Ivan Provorov right now. I hate to break it.
Teams will do it. Teams will do it.
You're not getting anything for him right now. What I was gonna say is
2 more years left. Teams will do it.
Nope.
Your retained salary, teams will do it.
So, I'm curious what Pascal Vincent does now, because when he got hired, we were like, oh, he's a guy that's known for development.
Yeah, he's
that's
being
like
the
what
AHL.
he does.
Yeah.
Right? He was really good with young players. And then all of a sudden we're seeing Adam Fantilli playing 4th line left wing, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm curious to see if that changes and he starts playing the young players.
Yeah, if that
in
was a
different
mandate.
roles, because that'll tell me that it was a mandate from the top. If he continues to play these young players in the same fashion he's got to be right after Kekäläinen after this season. Like, he's also got to go, because that is how you screw up your prospects.
If he Kekäläinen's gone, and the thing though is that Kekäläinen and Davidson, they've been attached to the hip forever.
Yeah.
Like, and
Davidson came from New York, I'm pretty
well,
sure.
Davidson was in Columbus when Kekäläinen got hired, then left for New York, then came back to Columbus.
Yeah.
So like they've been attached to the hip forever. And I'm wondering, I have to imagine that that they both didn't have a say in how they're playing this team and how they're icing this roster. Like, I have to imagine that both of them, if this was a mandate from up high, that both of them came together on it. So I don't know if it'll be too different, now that John Davidson's here. Like, I don't think that it was only Kekäläinen being like, get out of here, John. This is my plan.
Yeah.
Pascal, do it. Like, I don't think that was really what it is, but who knows? And if there is a significant change, if we start seeing Adam Fantilli get like top 6 or even top 3 minutes, if we see David Jiricek called up and actually put in a regular spot, Kent Johnson get more minutes, Cole Sillinger get more minutes, etc., then we owe Pascal Vincent an apology. If we don't, though, then
he's out.
Then if I'm a new GM and I'm interviewing for this job, and we'll talk about potential, like, maybe like 4 names that we can rip off the top of our head for that. But that, like, before we even get into salary, benefits, anything like that, I'm going like, I will not take this job unless I can fire Pascal Vincent.
I'm bringing in my own coach.
Like, I'm bringing
every GM usually gets
every GM should bring in their own coach. I think, like, it's very, I don't, and it always works. Like, when was the last time that a new GM came in? And maybe there's an obvious example, and I'm gonna get flamed for it, but like, when was the last time a new GM came in and inherited a coach and it just went along perfectly and they didn't skip a beat and actually turns out they were the greatest and it went on forever.
It's so funny because, like, everyone points to like Babcock, Lamoriello. They were hired within 2 weeks of each other.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that Lou was on side with it, I have a bridge to sell you.
Exactly.
But like, I remember in Vancouver, like when Patrick came in, like, that guy tried to push Bruce out the door, like, basically
right,
within
like
2 months.
like the first day.
Literally, they wanted Talkett. Like, the first time I heard Rick Tockett's name might have been in like not trade deadline, like just after trade deadline. So we're talking about March.
Yeah, like it's been happening for a long. Every
GM.
It's going to happen in Toronto, like inevitably. It's going to.
Brad's gonna want his guy.
100%. Like, Sheldon Keefe is not going to be the coach of the Leafs next season, and barring a run.
I was gonna say, he makes it to the 3rd round, he'll be the coach of the
But
Leafs.
you think the Leafs are going to make it to the 3rd round
No.
this year? Exactly. Like, it always. The only thing I can think of that
unless Wall goes Bobrovsky.
Exactly, and who knows, man, that can happen. Andrew Hammond got the Canucks, or not the Canucks, the Senators to the playoffs with like a 30-game win streak a couple years ago. Like, it happens. But the only thing I can see that would maybe buck the trend, and it's not going well right now, but I just don't see them ever firing this guy, is maybe Mike Sullivan and Kyle Dubas. They seem to like each other, and I feel like it's just like ingrained roster problems from the past iteration or regime.
Yeah.
But
that's not going well right now.
No, it's not. And this is going, like, it's going so bad that every night I see on Twitter people being like, they should trade Sidney Crosby. That's what I see every night. And so that's how bad it's going. But this is inevitably this doesn't work. So it's a shame because Pascal Vincent cut his teeth for so long in the AHL and he was assistant for so long, and it finally seemed like he was getting his shot. And if this isn't his doing, like if this is a mandate, then he clearly got like scapegoated, I guess, or was just the.
But if it is his doing, he's just as bad.
If it is his doing, it just makes no sense. Like, it goes against everything that his career has said before. Like why would
basically you coach one way to get to the top, and then you get to the
and
top,
then you do a complete 180? Like, you spend your entire career like built on development. I'm going to be in the AHL. I'm going to have great success in the AHL. I'm going to build up prospects. That's my job. And then I'm going to go and then my first step into the NHL is as an assistant, which is, again, another sort of developmental. And then the first time I get a spot at the top job, I'm going to alienate every single one of the team's prospects and only play like mid-veterans.
It's
incongruent. It makes no sense. So that's why I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But if nothing changes here, like, he's got to go.
Yep.
He's got to go. In terms of names, it's tough because what will likely happen is they'll wait till the offseason. They'll wait until Black Monday or whatever you want to call it, when teams fire their GMs or fire their coaches or whatever, and there are a bunch of new names hit the.
I can't think really of any GMs that are on the hot seat, though. That's the thing, is like, I'm not really sure how available guys are going to be.
What I think will happen is there are GMs of teams that will be disappointing potentially, or there will be like. I look at Minnesota, like that whole, I would bet that whole front office is going to dissipate.
So, speaking of Minnesota, I actually think Ray Shero might be a dark horse here.
Yeah?
My old boss.
Yeah?
Yeah, him and Jarmo were really close, but him and JD are really close as well. And I would hazard a guess that Columbus probably wants a voice of experience here. I could see Ray because... I mean, let's face it, Ray's front office built New Jersey, right? Ray's front office built Pittsburgh. And so you look at it, and I could see John Davidson going with what makes him comfortable. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Ray is in his late 60s.
Yeah. We got a real, Biden versus Trump situation in the front office where sleepy Ray out here, it's...
Yeah, like Ray's always been a sharp guy. But like...
So is my grandfather.
Yeah, I'm not saying that... Put it this way, I would probably prefer Ray for president than the options right now, given that he's 20 years younger than both of them.
Yeah.
But I think he might be a dark horse just because relationships are everything in this game. That wouldn't be my first choice.
Absolutely
but
not.
I wouldn't be surprised, is kind of what I'm saying.
Every time a GM opens up, the smartest thing that a team can do is to write the biggest check they possibly can and throw it, like literally put it into a catapult, tie a rock to it.
In their cannon, in their arena.
Put it in the cannon, tie a rock to it, and shoot it into the house of Eric Tulsky.
Yes.
That is the number one thing that they should do, because Eric Tulsky should be literally like reversing climate change instead of being in an NHL front office. But this is the thing
a PhD in chemistry.
But this is the thing that he wants to do. So whatever. And he is like well known around the league as like the smartest guy who's not in a GM chair, and he's likely smarter than about 90% of the GMs in the league right now.
Yeah, I would say that's a safe assumption.
However, he is very happy in Carolina. They have built something very cool and special in Carolina, and they continue to do that. And
it seems like the vibes in Carolina are
always
really
great.
starting to like pick up and come out on the upswing. I wouldn't be surprised if they run away with the Metro.
Well, their biggest competition to start the year was New Jersey, and they don't have a goalie, so that helps. But also,
New Jersey's not in a playoff spot.
Exactly,
now,
like
just to be clear.
Yeah, and so it's gonna be tough. But Eric Tulsky, he's happy there, and also like the thing that a lot of people have reported and that I've heard through just fifth-hand information or whatever is that I don't think he wants the responsibility and the front-facing sort of front-facing duties of being a GM. He's very happy being potentially the company's secret weapon, but emphasis on the secret.
Yes. So I could see it being a scenario where it's like he's actually running the team and making the decisions, but somebody else is going out and talking to the media.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. I could see that being a scenario. Yeah, Tulsky is far and away the smartest individual that is in the NHL that isn't in a GM chair. And I would agree with your assessment. He's better than most actual GMs.
Yeah.
I think Steve Greeley is another...
That's Dallas.
Yeah, I think he's either AGM or director of player personnel in Dallas. He's a really sharp guy. He's younger. I like that. Alexandra Mandrycky, obviously, in Seattle. She's like their AGM and director of research. I think she's fantastic, but she might be another one that doesn't necessarily want to be that front-facing, similar to Tulsky.
And I think a lot of these people, too, like Tulsky, I think a lot goes into these front office people wanting to stick around to see the fruits of their labor.
Yes.
And Seattle, it's much like it's easy to forget this is only their third year of existence. Rome wasn't built in a day. They made the playoffs last year. They knocked off the defending Stanley Cup champs. And
Rome wasn't built in a day.
It was not. No, I don't know. Maybe it was. The Library of Alexandria got burned down. We missed a lot of.
We should check out the conspiracy theories about that.
Definitely check it out. But that's definitely something we should do on this hockey podcast for sure. But I think that there's a lot of these people, a lot of these ambitious young front office folk, if you will, that. They just want to stick around to win the ultimate prize and then move on. What?
Sam Ventura in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Is another name. He is him. Well, it kind of makes sense because him and Alex were two of the three, along with Andrew, who started War on Ice. Sam, we don't need to have a discussion about how good the Buffalo Sabres moves have been over the past few years. Like, Sam's resume is very good.
Whether or not they translate on the ice lately in terms of a cohesive team, that's not on him. That's on someone else. But
that's not his problem. There's a reason why they are consistently getting A-pluses in the draft and free agency days. Now, they probably need some augmentation so that they can put it together and figure it out. But, yeah, they're still a really young team. Like, Rasmus Dahlin, I'm pretty sure, is like 22.
He's 20. He's 23. And that...
my sister turned 22 2 days ago, and I'm like, you're a child.
It's absolutely insane to think of how...
Zach Benson can barely sign his own permission form.
Yeah.
Like
for any field trips they go on.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like he's not even legal drinking age
Like if
in the United States.
like if the Bruins want to go to, or not the Bruins, if the Sabres want to take a trip to like the observatory for the day,
they have to call Zach's mom.
They have to call his mom and make sure that he's okay.
But no, there's definitely young, and I could see Columbus when they hired Kekäläinen, that was an out of the box hire.
It was,
right, and we credit them for that. And like obviously, okay, well it went on for 11 years, but I think they deserve some credit for showing that they're not afraid to kind of go outside. Like Zach Urbach, yeah, he did hockey analytics work, but he's also a lawyer, like a full blown lawyer. So he's outside of the box. Josh Flynn he's an AGM. He does their cap stuff, but he is a really sharp guy. Like I think he's going to be heavily involved in the next front office, because if you notice, probably the only thing that's going right in Columbus right now is their salary cap.
Yeah,
that's like the only thing they've gotten correct is their salary cap. And so I think he's a good candidate to like stick around. Doesn't seem like he wants to be a front-facing guy either, though. So maybe what you need is a guy that can talk. Maybe that is JD. And then you just assemble the Avengers underneath.
Yeah, maybe. It's interesting. Just I don't know. It's a really exciting job. But I also think that Columbus, given how although they've had a ton of coaching turnover, they seem to, especially under John Davidson, they like to stick with their guy. Like Kekäläinen got 11 years. It's a long time.
Think about this for a second.
We were in high school when he got hired.
Yeah, I was graduating.
Like we were just graduating high school.
I was buying a prom dress in February of 2013.
Exactly.
Like that's
that's when he got hired. Like that's a long time.
Man,
I don't think so. They're going to. What I think they're going to want to do is they're going to want to put someone in there who will be there for a while. They're not, that's why I think
not a 70-year-old or septuagenarian.
Exactly. That's why I think that they won't put Shiro in there, because in 3, 4, 5 years, he could potentially go, oh man, I'm too old for this. No. And step down, and they have another sea of change here. Like, I don't think, barring a Lou to Dubas mentorship kind of thing, which.
That's what John Davidson is for, no?
Exactly. So I think that they want to get someone who's on the upswing and who is willing to be there and like sort of shepherd their franchise for this foreseeable future.
Okay. So Tulsky, Greeley, Ventura,
Mandrycky, and who knows? Like if it wasn't basically written in the stars that Brandon Pridham's going to be the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins next summer, then I would say him as well. They've done great on the cap.
No, the Leafs are not letting him go anywhere. They will pay him.
His contract's up.
I'm telling you, they will triple what anyone else will offer to keep him. MLSE is not letting him leave. Not for all the tea in China are they letting him leave. So if he doesn't stay, it isn't because of money.
Oh yeah,
because it's been made very clear that they're like, we will sign. It's not Masai level.
It's close.
But it's because they understand how valuable he is.
Well, it's also like it's been an open secret that the reason why Dubas didn't name a GM, he named himself the GM for this year, is he was waiting for Pridham's contract to expire so he could poach him.
Yeah.
And like unless look, money really talks, but they really worked well together. So I think that it'll really be a 2-horse race there between Pittsburgh and Toronto, but I think he would be a great fit. So it's tough. It's going to be weird. Anyway, let's get into our Thursday deep dive.
Yeah, we just did a half an hour.
We did a half an hour on the Columbus Blue Jackets again. So our Thursday deep dive here, Rachel, is that, I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw a tweet about how, this is the year that guys who were previously written off as busts kind of came into their own. And these are high picks. And there's 4 sort of top line picks, 4 top 2 picks from the last couple of years.
We need to have a conversation about the word bust.
The word bust as well. Maybe we can tie that in. But, we got Quentin Byfield, Capo Caco, Alex Lafreniere, and Yuri Slafkovsky, who were previously written off as being sort of quote-unquote busts. And I would still say they're not producing up to the level of a top 2 pick.
Byfield now is.
Byfield now is. Yes.
Year.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But I mean, like the other 3. But they definitely shouldn't be written off. And that gives a bigger sort of conversation here in that when the acclimation project, the NHL has never been better than it is right now, I think.
Correct.
And so that means that the acclimation process for a young player, stepping in from junior, college, overseas, whatever, has never been harder and has never been longer.
Okay, so when we say bust, this is categorically, if you are a top 3 pick, you are expected to be a star in this league.
Yes.
Right? That's how it works. So like Jesse Puljujärvi, by abject definition, is a bust.
Teams sacrifice seasons just on the promise of you.
Yes, we're gonna talk about the improvements of guys like Slavkovsky, Lafreniere, Byfield, Kakko, whatever. Here's the thing, though.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a first overall pick, specifically a first overall pick, and you are not a superstar, you are you're a bust. Objectively, you are a bust. Because a first line or a first overall pick should be top 20 as a forward in scoring. And we're only going to cover forwards today.
Yes.
But this whole thing of he's not a bust because XYZ.
Because he's on a 40-point pace over the last 20 games or something.
And we're going to talk about this. They've improved.
Yes.
But by the definition of where they were selected, they are absolutely busts, and there is no two ways about it. Because until you are a point a game as a first overall pick, you're a bust. That just is what it is. You are supposed to be the best player in that draft, and you can't even play first line minutes and put up a point a game. That's a bust.
Especially where scoring is now, point per game should be
the minimum
where you're at.
So
now,
that's where I'm at with the word bust. I'm not saying that bust in the sense of he's never going to be an NHL hockey player, but for a first overall pick, if you are not a top line value player, I don't care if you're playing first line minutes on the 29th overall team. If you are not a top-line value player, which means you are scoring at least 70 points a year, you are a bust. It is that simple.
Absolutely. So Juraj Slavkovsky this season played 53 games. Last season was an abject disaster. He got hurt.
Last season, his comparisons were Nail Yakupov, Alex Galchenyuk,
two
Jesse Puljujärvi.
So basically the 3 biggest busts in recent memory. Straight up. That was the think about it. When people say who are the 3,
he wasn't Alexander Daigle, but
that
far off.
Daigle was from the 90s. I'm talking about in the salary cap era.
Yeah.
Since 2013, even in the post 2012 lockout era, really.
Yeah.
Nail Yakupov, Alex Galchenyuk, and Jesse Puljujärvi, when it comes to top 3 picks. And you could factor in a couple other guys, but a lot of them, went down because of injuries or other things. Those are the 3 probably the biggest busts there are.
And then the other one, which I left out, was remember the first 3 years of Jesperi Kotkaniemi's career?
Absolutely, yeah.
He was comparable to that as well.
Yeah. What is the common denominator?
The Habs.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Galchenyuk, Slavkovsky, Kotkaniemi. It's the Habs. Oh, problem solved. We fixed it.
All right. Podcast over. Subscribe to YouTube. No,
but now he's at a spot. So when you compare him this year, he's a lot better. Jake Neighbors, that's a 20-ish overall pick.
Yeah.
Nils Höglander, that's a second overall pick. Pavel Dorofeyev.
Would you draft any of those guys first overall?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So right now,
but are they NHL players?
Much better. Slavkovsky.
Yes. They're not NHL players, but if you're a first overall pick being compared to Nils Höglander, Pavel Dorofeyev, and Jake Neighbors, that's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem.
But he's shown improvement, and there's no reason to think, because he's so young, I have confidence that he is going to continue to improve. Do I think he is ever going to be considered worthy of a first overall pick? No. But do I think he can be a top 6 player? Yes, I think he could be a top 6 winger, not on a contending team.
Yeah, which is a disaster for a first overall pick. But still, Then you get Alex Lafreniere, who was very highly touted as well.
Oh my God! We were hearing about him since he was 14.
Exactly, and the Rangers pick him miraculously.
Once again, another organization that does no idea
how to develop its players.
Because who are we talking about after Lafreniere? We're talking about Kakko.
Yes.
That's 2 picks.
Yeah.
So I think
back-to-back years.
The Rangers and the Habs are more at fault than Slavkovsky, Kotkaniemi, because we're also going to talk about Kotkaniemi.
Think about all the drafted talent that the Rangers have wasted. I even think about Niels Lundqvist. He was a first-round pick. Lias Andersson.
There was another player as well.
They gave up on Buchnevich.
Gave up on Buchnevich. Philip Edel is different because he's having injury
Yes.
issues.
And he was doing well before.
Very good.
He was doing well before.
So I don't want to count him.
No, definitely not.
But yeah,
But like that's like 4
remember
first.
Dylan McElrath? Like
Yeah, like stuff like that. But
this is ridiculous. Okay, so Lafreniere, last year and like up until basically the beginning of this year, his comps were Josh Bailey, Mikhail Bodker, and Robbie Fabry.
It's brutal.
Like, okay, NHL hockey players.
But
First overall picks?
But Josh Bailey,
be out of your mind.
Josh Bailey, keep in mind too, was bought out this past summer
Yeah.
and was like 58 years old. Mikhail Bodker is another guy who people throw the bust word around him for, and Robbie Fabry is a guy who was highly touted, but and is fine as an NHL
Do you
player.
remember Peter Mueller?
Of course, I remember Peter Mueller.
He was also comparable to him.
Yeah, so like,
Oh, fuck!
are we noticing a trend? These guys, their first comparables, their comparables in their early career, are guys who have been hit with the bust label.
Right. Now, this season, because Peter Laviolette's got it figured out and is actually
Yeah.
playing his young players, Matt Boldy, heyo,
Yep.
Brandon Hagel, that's a middle six player.
He just got a max contract, like a max term contract.
And
that's
Jesper
pretty
Bratt.
good. Another guy who got a max term. All 3 of these guys got a max term contracts.
And Jesper Bratt, not a chance should he have been available in the 6th round.
No, and that's
Phenomenal.
But these are all very
That is
good
a
players.
much better comparison. Like, okay, would I take Matt Boldy with a top 5 pick? Absolutely.
Would you take Brandon Hagel?
No.
Would you take Jesper Bratt?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I
So
think
that's
about it.
so that's better. That's a huge step up. Like Lafreniere was doing nothing. People were wondering
And I think Laviolette deserves
a lot of
immense
credit. People were wondering if they were even going to re-sign him as an RFA. Like it was tough. Like and so
He was on the trade block.
he was on the
last
trade
year.
block, and he was a first round pick. Got picked like 3 years ago.
Okay, should we talk about the other Ranger then?
We should talk about Capo Caco, whose comparables were Carl Grunstrom, Tanner Jeannot, and Magnus Pajärvi Svensson.
Not ideal.
Tough, but this year much better.
Much, much better. Jaden Schwartz. Mm-hmm. Teuvo Teravainen. Alex Tuck.
All reliable middle 6 players, not second overall picks.
And specifically, Schwartz and Tuck are power forwards.
Yeah.
That is exactly what Kako is.
Exactly.
If Kako can be Alex Tuck, but like a little slower, you're thrilled with that.
Yeah.
You are thrilled
Absolutely.
with that. And so, yeah, again, not a second overall pick. Like, I would not be taking any of those guys with a second overall pick, but would I take them in the first round? Yes, I absolutely would. So, okay. And I think power forwards, generally speaking, like I went back and I looked at my research from school and whatever. Generally speaking, power forwards take longer to develop. So that Slavkovsky fits that, Byfield fits that, Kako fits that. But like, not like Rick Nash should be what Slavkovsky, like that was the comparable.
That's
I
what
kept
he's
seeing
striving
thrown
to be.
around,
Yeah.
and we're not even remotely close to that. But like with where Capo Caco's concerned, like Alex Tuck took a ton of time to develop. Remember, Vegas got him in the expansion draft.
Yeah.
Right? He took a ton of time to sort of really come into his own.
There were at least two teams that he kind of washed out of.
So I left this guy out of the comparables because of all of the stuff that happened after. But it is notable that both Slavkovsky and Kako compared to Jake Virtanen, who was another obscene bust.
Yeah.
Like brutal
Didn't do anything.
hockey player.
Yeah.
Right? And now they've got much more favorable comparisons. But that's another guy who has, like, obviously prior to facing a criminal charge, like, he was a fourth line player. You cannot have that for a top 10 pick. Like, it just doesn't work.
Hold on, are you talking about Edmonton Oilers PTO acceptee
Jake
Virtanen?
Yes. That's
Okay.
exactly.
So also, if any of these guys have had to sign a PTO to extend their career, they're a bust. I want to talk
Byfield.
about Quentin Byfield. Obviously, his we have it in here. It's Gregory Denisenko, Jake Virtanen, and Yuri Tlusty.
Oh, that is not good for last year, like pre this season.
Now I have a soft spot in my heart for Yuri Tlusty, because he it looked like he was picking up a little bit in Toronto, and also he was just like a crime was committed against him by the Toronto Sun when he was here.
Yes.
So I always will have sympathy for him, but now Quinn Byfield's comparables are Matthias Michelli, who got a very nice contract last year and is very good. Matt Boldy again, and Mason Marchment.
Right.
Again, not guys you would pick second overall.
But that's also because Byfield has been part of. I have an asterisk on Byfield because he's played less games than Kakko, Lafreniere, Slavkovsky in terms of like he's been in the AHL for longer, and so the model isn't as accurate with him. And I wanted to say that like the model for his comparisons isn't as accurate because he hasn't played, like the sample size isn't as big.
Yeah.
So when we get to like the end of this season, maybe what we'll do is like I'll update Byfield because I also took a cursory look and I basically what I did is I extended his point. Like his play projection over the course of the entire season, then we're talking about like legit top line players.
So this bleeds into a point that I wanted to make is that he is the only one out of all of these guys, Puljujarvi withstanding because it only happened this year, but any of these guys really who have played AHL games.
Like, and guess who one of the best teams is at developing young prospects?
The LA Kings.
Might it be LA?
Yes.
LA and Anaheim.
Exactly. But I'm saying this will, and then I want to tie in.
We're not even going to do a defenseman one because it's just going to be the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, but also defenseman we can't compare. Like, but what I want to do is I want to look at top 2 picks from the last couple drafts, and I want to look at their points per game and their top end ice time by year 3. So these are points per game through the first 3 years of their career.
Well, we got to get through a couple more.
No, I know, but what we're going to do with that. But Byfield, out of all these guys, is the only guy who was developed in the AHL first. And the big
He's going to end up being the best one.
Exactly. And if you look at him, he's taken the biggest leap this year. Yep. He seems to have the most upside. His development has been the less stalled. And the biggest thing that we talked about, we always talk about with Slavkovsky, is how much better would this guy be if they had just let him play in the AHL, let him rip up the AHL for his first year, even for a bit at the start of this year, because it seems like they're kind of stunting him. Like he will, but who knows?
They probably should have let him play in Sweden the year he was drafted. Like
Slavkovsky?
Yeah, they were playing in Slovakia. Let him go play in the SHL, then bring him over.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but if you look at the jersey to your left, that guy played in the SHL in the year after he was drafted. Came over, and now he's about to get like a $13 million contract. Seemed to work pretty good for Elias Pettersson.
Oh, like that. I thought you were talking about Slavkovsky jersey. I'm like, who does he sit next to? And I don't know. But no, like
there's no shame in waiting.
Yeah.
This thing about first overall picks having to play right away is nonsense. You need to do what's best for the player.
And so that's why I wanted to bring that up, is that the acclimation process has changed. The NHL has never been better than it is now, and players are taking longer to fit in and to hit their ceilings than ever before. Like I would say the top 2 picks, top 3 picks in drafts are taking longer than they ever have.
Right. There's obviously notable exceptions, but like
no, but like we're talking about generation. Unless you're
right.
a generational guy.
Bedard, McDavid, Matthews.
Yeah.
End of the list.
But that's and that's and we'll talk about that. But like it was even relatively rough sledding for Jack Eichel at the start. It was for Dylan Strome. Like
Mitch Marner got sent back.
Exactly. Like stuff like that. It's very, and he was a 4th overall pick, but it's very, for the top 2 picks, we've seen, this is,
okay, Byfield, but I also think we can agree we would take Mitch Marner over every single
absolutely.
player we've named here.
Maybe not in the playoffs, but yeah, absolutely.
No, absolutely in the playoffs.
I know. Anyway. But Byfield is the only guy on this list, and we'll keep going, who was brought up slowly through the AHL process. And he will likely be the guy who will have the highest ceiling out of any of these guys.
Yeah.
There's a correlation there. This is going to be the new norm, and it's going to start, and it should start being the new norm, is teams will not be afraid of whatever, if it's a stigma or if it's something, of picking a guy potentially even first overall who's really raw. Like Slavkovsky he has great skills.
He's raw.
He's huge. He's got a good shot. He's got a good toolbox, but he's very raw.
He has no idea how to put it together.
Exactly. Where do you do that? In the AHL. Where do you not want to do that? In the NHL, in one of the most hotly fishbowl type markets, where every one of his mistakes will be glommed onto, and then Habs fans will be, just basically doing mental friggin' Simone Biles moves to try and make it seem like this guy is not producing under what they wanted him to. Another guy though is Patrick Laine, and when he started out, so this was last season, his comparables, I guess.
No. This was his the first 3 seasons of his career, because we have first 3 seasons for these guys. It was Sean Monahan, Kyle Connor, and Alex Galchenyuk.
Those are, other than Galchenyuk, I don't know how, but although Galchenyuk had the 30-goal seasons, he started out hot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why he's
so those are good.
There.
Yes.
Now he's Daniel Sprong, Brian Rust, Oliver Bjorkstrand. Now, we need to point out that there has been more at play with Patrick Laine.
Absolutely.
Than that meets the eye here. So we included him because he was a top 2 pick, but we're not going to sit here and criticize him because there has been so much he's had to deal with, be it a trade, his father tragically passing away.
We're not going to be another
goals.
podcast that makes him feel worse about himself.
In fact, I hope that when Patrick Laine comes back, he scores 50 goals.
Yeah.
I hope he stands there and claps bombs on the power play like Dennis Bayak used to call, because that was one of my favorite things in the first few years of his career. I am dying for Patrick Laine to come back, and I hope he scores 4 goals in his first game.
Yeah.
I've always loved watching that guy play. The second I saw that podcast make that comment, I was like, where can I donate? I could not have donated faster because of what happened, but we included him because he was a top 2 pick. But if you look at it, his comparables, Brian Rust has played on the top line with Crosby. He's playing with Malkin, which Malkin is a top line center. He's going in the Hall of Fame. And Oliver Bjorkstrand is on the top line in Seattle. That is more than fun.
Yeah,
especially when you consider that these are his comparables while he's been going through a bunch of crap.
This is probably, just in terms of on-ice play, based on everything that's going around him, this is probably the worst on-ice version of Patrick Laine. And those are still his comparables. That's not bad.
Yeah, I'll take that on my team anytime.
Jesse Puljujarvi, for the first 3 years of his career, his comparables were Slavkovsky, Owen Tippett, and Jake Virtanen. Now, Tippett has turned it around, obviously,
this season.
But Slavkovsky and Virtanen, 2 guys, and I know we talked about Slavkovsky, but 2 guys who are in that bust conversation.
Right.
And obviously this year, Patrick Hornquist, Anthony Mantha, and Paul Cotter. And I had to think about for a second who Cotter's first name was. so that's not great. And then obviously Cody Glass, he was a very, very high pick.
Yeah. Jim Benning wanted to take Cody Glass over Elias Pettersson.
Hilarious.
That is funny. So his comparables, and Cody Glass has faced a ton of injuries.
Yes.
He has a lot of stuff going on off the ice.
Yes.
Isaac Lindstrom, Barrett Hayton, Michael Dal Cole. Oh boy!
Not great.
This year, it's gotten a lot better. Rasmus Kupari, Niels Höglander, Jason Zucker.
Not bad. All very productive
fair,
NHL players.
He was a 6th overall pick.
All very productive players.
Right, and he's really starting to actually find his stride now. So I think middle 6 player, that's fine.
Yeah. And then the last one is Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who was a 3rd overall pick by the Montreal Canadiens. He was Nino Niederreiter, Philip Hedl, and Ilya Mikheyev. This year, though, he's taken a big dive.
Yeah. Joe Veleno, Morgan Frost, and Ryan McLeod.
Oh, Ryan McLeod.
Yes, Ryan McLeod.
Yikes.
Who actually has been pretty good in Edmonton.
That'd be fine.
And Morgan Frost has been up and down. Joe Veleno's been pretty good in Detroit. But Kotkaniemi is kind of one of those weird, I don't think he plays the Rod Brindamore style.
No.
At all.
Why did they sign him for 8 years?
That is another one of those players where simply should not have been in the NHL after they drafted him. What are you doing?
It is, yeah.
First of all, he's about as thick as I am. You're literally putting a child in the NHL.
Yeah, it was not a great idea. And if anyone on this list should have gotten time to marinate, it was Jesperi Kotkaniemi.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. We've been over this a million times, but I don't understand with the Habs why they would spend the money and the resources and the time and just the effort to establish their AHL team in their own backyard.
To not use it?
To just never use it with players that matter.
Well, they did it with Arbor Jacki. I'm like, wow. We did.
But that's Arbor Jacki. All due respect, he's gonna be fine.
It's not Juraj Slavkovsky.
But what is his ceiling, a number 4? It's something like that. He's Arbor Jacki. There's lower stakes on that.
Yeah.
Why would you had
you didn't
Jesperi
expend a 1st overall pick on him?
Believe me, when Laval first came into commission, basically.
Yeah.
It was one of my first years covering the Toronto Marlies. It was my first year covering the Toronto Marlies, I believe. It was my first ever job, and I saw that team 15 fucking times that season. And let me tell you, their rosters were pretty rough. Like it was.
They could use some young.
They
help.
didn't. Like they had it. They had an AHL team in like name only to bring guys like Adam Cracknell into it, or like I could go on or have Xavier Ouellet be the captain.
Gabriel Dumont.
Exactly. Like for some reason they thought we have to have an AHL team filled with like triple or quadruple A guys who are veterans instead of actually using or sending down guys in a meaningful way, because they didn't. Yes, you can say they sent down Cole Caulfield. They didn't do that in a meaningful way.
No.
They did that to like punish him.
Yeah, it was dumb.
When friggin' Dom Ducharme was in charge, then he got fired and Caulfield immediately got called back up. It's stuff like that. So now I want to this has historically been happening at like a bigger rate in recent years, where a team will basically guys who are picked in the first or second overall picks. Their first 3 years have been declining when it comes to points and production and also usage since basically for the last, I would say, 5 years. And we start with the McDavid draft. Obviously, McDavid had 1.22 points per game in his first 3 seasons.
How'd he turn out?
Incredibly good. Very good.
Is he good at hockey?
Exactly. And he was.
Would you say he's a bust?
I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
Bust David. But like 1.22 points per game in his first 3 years, and he topped out at 21 minutes and 33 seconds of average ice time a night.
McBust.
So they were playing him a ton.
Yep.
And he was producing a ton. Jack Eichel, a little bit less, but 0.84 points per game, but he was still getting 20 minutes a night. So teams were using their first overall picks a lot, and they're producing a lot. Then there was Matthews. And again, like it's a little bit less based on Mike Babcock for some reason not wanting to play guys like that, but 0.96 points per game in his first 3 seasons. 40 goals in his first ever year too.
Yeah.
And he also was doing 1833 of average ice time. So that's okay. Patrick Laine, he had a great first 3 years, 0.77 points per game, 17-14 in average ice time. But then we start to see the dip. Because we had Hischier, he's the first overall pick in 2017.
I was there.
You were there, yeah.
Season, so I can actually give insight into
that. Yeah,
one.
0.65 points per game over his first 3 seasons.
Yep.
1804 of ice time. So we start to see the dip a little bit.
His first year, he didn't actually start playing with Taylor Hall until mid-November. It's probably about a month and a half in. And then obviously Taylor went on that obscene
where he won
run.
He won the Hart. Yeah.
And at that point, so Hischier's one of the best two-way forwards in the game now. But at that point, John, because he was a rookie and he didn't want him to hit a wall because he obviously came from the CHL, we didn't play him on the penalty kill that year, like the way that he was capable of, because we were concerned about obviously like longevity, right? You don't have to play on the penalty kill in your first year.
Yeah.
Now he's on the penalty kill. He's like their first line penalty kill out all the time. And so he gets like an extra 2-3 minutes a game because he plays on the penalty kill. But like, yeah, like he sure was never ever going to be the point producer in the way that like McDavid, Eichel, Matthews were. He was going to be that elite 2A guy, kind of like Barkov. Yeah.
And so then we see Jack Hughes, 0.65 points per game. His first season, as you remember, was a disaster. 21 points in like 65 games or something. Like, it was bad. We were saying
he should have gone to school.
Exactly. He was still, and he topped out at 1934.
That's another guy who was literally the size of me.
Yeah. Then obviously Nolan Patrick had injury problems.
Yeah, so it's not fair.
So it's not really fair, but he had 0.35 points per game and topped out at 13-17.
That was also in Philadelphia, and they were a mess.
Yes.
So.
And then also Andrei Svechnikov, 0.68 points per game, 17-32. Teams since the McDavid, Eichel, Matthews, and even Laine, teams in their top...
Since 2016.
Since basically 2016, teams have been playing their first 2 picks less, and teams have been... And also those picks, as a result, have been producing less. There's a correlation between those two.
I think that there is a relation to talent level as well, because like Chicago's playing the shit out of Bedard when he's healthy, and apparently he might be back tonight, which would be great.
They're consulting with doctors. That's crazy.
But then you look at it, okay, McDavid, Matthews have to be removed. Those are generational.
Yes.
Matthews is a generational goal scorer. McDavid is so far and away clearly the best player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So fine. But like Eichel, Laine, those are good examples of what you kind of like the point you were making about they're being played more.
Yeah.
Right? Now we're in a situation where I look at it and I go, okay, like Jack Hughes is in that conversation with Eichel for sure. Whereas I think like Hischier and Svechnikov and Laine are sort of like a tier below because Hischier, from a scoring standpoint, like from a talent standpoint, it goes McDavid, then Matthews, then I would say probably Hughes, right? And you look at it, and the difference between McDavid, Matthews, and Hughes is Hughes was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Like he still looks like a boy,
Yeah.
right? He doesn't have the man strength. Like, you look at Austin Matthews, and now I'm like, okay, that's a man. Like, that's thick.
Even when Matthews was drafted, like, he was a big guy.
Right. And so I think part of it is talent. Like, you can't play guys 20 minutes a night that don't have the capability of playing first line minutes in their first year. Right? He sure was more of a protection thing because he was not small, but, like, he had boyhood strength. He was thick, but it was boy strength.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that he really started to come into his own. But he's also not remotely the scorer that McDavid or Eichel or Matthews are.
And the role that he was going to have to play was more dependent on him having a frame that could keep up with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at it, you need to recognize and give your players the opportunity. But if they're not ready, there is no shame in sending them down. So, like, if you look at Svechnikov, for example, like, Rod Brind'Amour started him slower. Now he's on the top line with Sebastian Aho. Like, and that's exactly where he belongs. So some guys take longer, but I think at the end of the day, we look at it and it's like the talent level is just so much different. Like the difference between Slavkovsky and Bedard is a chasm.
Yeah.
The difference between Bedard and pretty much anybody but Matthews and McDavid is a chasm in terms of first overall picks. So, like, kind of don't like to use them, but I think you make a great point.
No, but they're like that's if I know that they're generational players, but they were picked in that spot, and as we see,
but if you look at non-generational first overall picks, Aaron Ekblad, who took a bit to come in.
He took a while, yeah.
McKinnon took a little bit to come in, and now
definitely
he's literally a psycho.
The whole reason why he was making the best contract in the league for so long was because he took so long to come in.
Fire your agent.
No, but like, but also
you should not have signed a contract that long.
Definitely not that long. But also, like, McKinnon he scored like 57 points the year he signed that contract.
Whereas, like, instead of, like, I think these guys, so like a Hischier, a Laine, like, they're more comparable to guys who were picked like third, fourth, fifth over, like a Matthew Tkachuk, a Brady Tkachuk, like those kind of guys. And so you get ice time in line with that. I think you have to almost like look at the talent level, but at the same time, you can't also sit here and say, like, they're not busts for first overall picks. I'm not expecting every first overall pick to be a generational talent. However, I am expecting every single first overall pick to be in the neighborhood of a point per game or a top pairing defenseman. Like Rasmus Dahlin.
And I think that we should set, like, if they're not at least approaching that by year 3, then we can start to write them off. But it takes longer. Like, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes, like, if Slavkovsky's not approaching a point per game next year,
by the end of next year,
we're having a very different conversation.
But now, like, basically the whole thesis of this is that it takes longer than ever for top picks.
Look at what Seattle's doing with Shane Wright. They're like, you're playing in the AHL.
Exactly.
And that's going to be, I guarantee you, that's going to be what's best for his development.
They tried to pull the Montreal Canadiens Slavkovsky thing on him last year. It was a disaster. And then they pulled the ripcord mid-season and decided to go, let's just restart. And it worked really well. He almost, I believe he almost won a Calder Cup.
Yep.
You know, it worked out well. And it will likely work out well.
Exactly what LA did with Byfield.
Exactly. And we need to start changing our perspective or changing our perception of what success is or the timeline for success for a top 2, top 3, top 4 pick these days. Because teams are...
I still think you should be an impact player in your first year, but you don't need to be a point a game. You need to be able to impact the game in your first year.
Especially if you're a first overall pick.
If you're a first overall pick and your team opts to play you.
Yes.
Because I think in Slavkovsky's case, they should have sent him back. right?
Yeah.
But if you are a first overall pick and your team is playing you, you need to be an impact player. You have to be.
You need to be able
You
to
have
chip in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Slavkovsky had 4 goals in 39 games last year.
Not going to
That's
cut it.
not good enough. He has
You need to be
11
at,
and
like,
50.
15. Maybe 10.
Well, he has 11 and 56 this year. He will likely end with 15. Or he's 11
Fine.
and 52 or something this year. He
Fine.
will likely end in 15, but that's a good step.
That's a great step. So now we'll revisit and see where him, Byfield, Lafreniere, Kakko are next season.
Exactly. And on that note, we've reached the end of the podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Instagram, TikTok, anything. Any podcatcher, we're there. Write us a review. That'll be nice. You can also check out some Mike's Meals for One content that we'll have next week. And as always, donate to Jumpstart, our charity of choice. Helps economically disadvantaged children play team sports, which is a cause that is extremely close to Rachel and I's hearts. All the descriptions will be in the bio of this podcast below. So do that, and we'll be back